Well, moving on to what I consider to be, David Hopper is quite an amazing person. I don't know how you think of yourself, David, but I think of you this way. Here we are, we're having a conference in the snow, gosh, about 2000, and it was forgotten about by the hotel. It was a difficult time. And we're up there freezing, but we had a nice small conference, very small. And two or three people came through. Harold Moses was there and said, I live in Phoenix. What about next year, Phoenix Rising? And we said in our shivers, yes. Well, then, David comes to play in many ways here throughout, but David and Joanne living here in Phoenix. Now, David's a longtime student of these teachings and has done a number of things with his life, but two things that stand out for me. One is just anchoring a number of people who've come here to do teaching in Phoenix. And the second thing is I first met him in depth. You came and you gave a little talk on the crop circles. We were living in California up there. And thought he goes around and looks for these kind of amazing things, which interests me a lot. It's looking for how things are breaking through. So he is a man out and about looking and searching for these things. And now in this a book on subtle activism, picking up with thinkers who are trying to play with or help us, what do we do with the ideas and thoughts that we have? How do we affect the world, both by noticing and also by bringing forth our thoughts to bear on this? David may say much more than this in his talk today as he talks about these influences of the 7 C groups, but we are thankful that you're with us. Thank you, and thank you, Joanne. So, welcome, David.
Thank you, Sheldon. Is this alive here now? There we go. Thank you, Sheldon, for that gracious introduction. The title of my talk is Subjective Influences Through the 10 Seed Groups. Today I'll be discussing subjective influences on the inner and the outer planes, each of the 10 seed groups individually, and I'll make some concluding remarks. As I begin, there's two themes that I'd like to underscore throughout my talk. One, that we are being called by our soul and the hierarchy to know and become consciously aware in all that we do and think. Second, that we enable right human relations. And what is right human relations? From externalization of the hierarchy, the Tibetan says right human relations is not simply goodwill, it is a product and result of goodwill and the instigator of constructive changes between individuals, communities, and nations. In essence, it is the result of a practiced love and acceptance among peoples and groups. Get my clicker here. Okay, well, we'll try the manual way. For over a century, the hierarchy in the ashrams have been influencing disciples and aspirants and light workers around the world with ideas and impressions. Their objective is to bring about cohesion and rhythmic activity for the unfoldment of the divine plan through the 10 seed groups. The seed groups, as the Tibetan calls them, represent new modes of communication and have literally been the creative source for both individuals and groups in the social, political, cultural, scientific, and economic sectors of the world civilization. And I'll be discussing each of the 10 seed groups shortly. It works. Great transition. Obviously, humanity is in the throes of a great transition, which will herald a new and evolutionary shift in individual human consciousness. With the two great ages of Pisces and Aquarius overlapping each other, we are now at the midway point of that transition. It marks a move toward a greater group awareness represented by the Aquarian principle and influence of sharing. Nearing the actual Aquarian age, which is 2117, we're told, we are entering the last stages of the stage of the Forerunner, which will last until approximately 2025, just 7 years away. Stage is all about increased service-related activity on the inner planes between the hierarchy, light workers, initiates, leading up to 2025. Around that date, the Tibetan Dwell Kul said the hierarchy will meet in conclave to discuss the next stage of evolution for humanity and the first stages of the externalization of the hierarchy and the reappearance of the Christ, or the world teacher. Keep in mind that the externalization of the reappearance is in fact the externalization of higher soul values such as cooperation, inclusiveness, goodwill, working out through the 10 seed groups. Through the activities of the light workers, they've been setting the stage for perhaps the most powerful subjective influence emanating from the coming world teacher, or as many great religions refer to as the coming one. In different cultures, he is referred to as the Imam Mahdi, the Lord Maitreya, the world teacher, or the Christ. It is the same great being. Keep in mind that although the Christ is supposed to be taking the seventh initiation, he has never left the planet and still exerts tremendous influence upon the lower 49 planes. When he does return, he and the hierarchy will come as guides for humanity and not as saviors. Light workers, who are they? I'm using the term light workers as a shorthand for what we call the New Group of World Servers and the men and women of goodwill. In the early part of the 20th century, the masters noted there were numerous service-related groups and workers. As a result of the conclave in 1925, they decided at the ashramic level that the light workers should act initially as a focused group in carrying out the plan. And what do? Major function of the light workers is to act as a bridge between humanity, hierarchy, and the ashram to invoke thought forms, ideas, and impressions from these higher sources and turn them into creative solutions. The light workers are called the hands and feet of the hierarchy, and they spiritualize the thought life of each of the 10 seed groups and help to establish right human relations, particularly in the lower 18 subplanes. When I speak of higher sources, I refer to the hierarchy in the ashrams located primarily on the intuitional plane. You can use this here. Intuitional plane, this space right up in here. Light workers who are active on the physical and astral and mental planes are invoking the thought forms and impressions from the masters, and in so doing, they're carrying out their spiritual work toward fulfilling the divine plan. Beyond all activities in the cosmic physical plane, that is, the lower 49 planes, there is a divine plan. So what is the divine plan? From a treatise on white magic, DK said, the plan is a production of a subjective synthesis in humanity and of a telepathic interplay which will reveal to man the true significance of his mind and brain and make him the master of that equipment. Although we cannot know the plan directly until we achieve the third initiation, we at least know that the plan gives mankind purpose, vision, and serves as a blueprint for evolution of the lower four kingdoms. The plan allows us to have a direct experience of relationships, wisdom, and knowledge to greater beings than ourselves. Here we have the three planetary centers diagram, and there's three major aspects represented here. Will, purpose from Shambhala as the first aspect, love, wisdom coming from the hierarchy, which is the second aspect, and activity or active intelligence coming from humanity as the third aspect. These three centers are closely interrelated and as a whole represent divine livingness. Keep in mind the following influences from implementing the plan. The Christ and the Buddha act as influences from beyond the lower 49 planes. Shambhala, representing the will, purpose, and synthesis, is focused as one great tension of will, love, and active intelligence. The hierarchy, as custodians of the plan, receive and interpret the plan as will, stepped down from Shambhala. The Humanity Center, the light workers act as intermediaries between hierarchy and humanity for implementing the plan. The right use of these energies will positively affect the behaviors of leaders in government and those of influence in the economic sector. In essence, all departments of society will be affected. The 10 C groups. They were first defined in the early 1930s or mentioned by DK in the early 1930s as a long-term experiment by the hierarchy. The word seed is important as it is the ashram that seeds or communicates the essence of what a specific group does and will become. This endeavor is intended to create 9 external seed groups corresponding to those already existing in the ashrams. Seed group 10 was added later as a synthesizer with the other 9. The hierarchy intends that each group becomes a magnetic and focal point of energy with the intent of creating that same energy on the physical plane. Currently, the light workers are active in all seed groups, and their activities help to subjectively transform civilization with the objective of impressing the plan on leaders of the 10 seed groups. This will bring about cohesion and revitalization of the etheric body of humanity, and will eventually establish each group as powerful focal points for the planet. So let's talk now about each seed group and what it's destined to become in the New Age. Due to time, I'm only going to provide a brief outline of each group and provide more extensive information, of course, in my book, which is available in the bookstore. Shameless thing there. Seed group 1, the telepathic communicators. Telepathic communicators are the custodians of group purpose and work through the mental plane by sending and receiving ideas and impressions using the mind from the master. Their work involves transcending speech between individuals and groups so that a new way of communication can be brought about. In essence, their work has the goal of changing the direction of thoughts on the lower 18 subplanes and helping to relate it to energies in the spiritual triad. As an example, in our current world, they hold the higher concept of right relationship working out between men and women, which helps overcome the issue of sexual harassment. Stephen Dinan the other day brought up in his talk when he discussed the noble masculine as an example, which sees himself as supporting higher values for the good of the greater group. The telepathic communicator influences leading people in all professions. He aligns with the soul and invokes and attracts details of the plan into his field of consciousness. From externalization of the hierarchy, the Tibetan says, Group 1 can telepathically influence leading people to speak their minds so that they may be impressed with the need which has been described by the Great Ones as the loving salvage of the world. They must be led to realize that their policies must be determined for world good. When engaging in this type of activity, the truly telepathic man knows that the intuition should be developed to allow for clear communication and direct knowledge. From this, his personality must become decentralized and allow him to be sensitive to impressions coming from the soul, the master or other light workers, and from the world of the intuition. Seed Group 2, the trained observers. Primary objective of the trained observer is to dispel glamour and illusion on the astral plane. This allows truth and events to be clearly seen and known. For the average person, the astral plane is real and becomes an obstacle in allowing energies from the plane of the soul or the hierarchy from reaching the mind of man. A good example of a trained observer in today's world is the activity of the journalists, both in the print and broadcast media. Keep in mind that the astral plane, like a thick fog, is made up of the energies of glamour and illusion. This fog can be penetrated with a bright light of the soul in the form of direct knowledge, truth, understanding, and right interpretation. Trained observer then radiates the truth into the plane of illusion and glamour and releases the thought forms of separatism that currently exists in the global media. And with that description, that's very similar to the technique of light described in Glamour World Problem. Trained observer must be able to remove himself from the events and occurrences of the lower 18 planes. He employs right observations of events and situations. Come on, mouse. By withdrawing himself from the center of activity. Here's a quote from a friend I got. Truth ought to be presented in such a way that it convinces without binding, so that it may appeal even without convincing, and only the language of the heart can accomplish this. I did a search on Google and couldn't find an author for this, so it's attributed to unknown. In a similar vein, When connecting with the soul, the trained observer will use his abstract mind for receiving impressions from the plane of the intuition. The observer can then act as a communication link between the plane of the intuition, or the Buddhic plane, and the plane of the illusion and glamour, the astral plane. See Group 3, the magnetic healers. The Tibetan tells us that the magnetic healer working with a disease will transmit healing energy from the soul's living force directly into the patient. The magnetic healer can also work on mental levels by telepathically conveying illumination or buddhi to the patient for dispelling illusion. These both have the effect of working with the causes of a disease and not the outer effects. The magnetic healer facilitates healing of the personality by working subjectively with vital forces in the etheric or vital bodies for dissipating disease and healing a break between the human and deva kingdoms. For healing at the group level, the magnetic healer must identify in consciousness with the hierarchy of masters in group formation and not as a separate individual. This will enable coordination and healing of the group patient to allow the group to become an instrument for the distribution of energy. Group 4, educators in the New Age. Future educators will teach how to become the transmitter of two aspects of divine energy, namely knowledge and wisdom of what civilization has to offer. Their initial objective will be to prepare people for esoteric training for developing higher values such as cooperation, goodwill, teaching education for peace, and bridge the gap between the lower mind and the soul. Esoteric education would train the student in knowing that it is the soul who is the motivating influence behind all events, and how he must integrate with it. A higher objective of the educator will be to build the Antakarana for linking the higher mind of the personality with the soul into a functioning and integrated whole. This will help establish an Antakarana between man's mental plane and the hierarchy. New Age education will also work along the lines of culture and provide character building and meaning of right human relations from birth. The individual will practice self-discipline and learn about right application of energy and personal will as a force. The student would learn how to appropriately deal with and learn to transmute the energies of fear and anger and selfish behavior. Besides intellectual and academic training, education must prepare youth for transcending anything that causes separation between people. Education should teach the individual to develop a sense of synthesis with all humanity. And this would be an understanding of the bonds of relationship, first to know his immediate family, but his vision should extend to embracing the larger community, nation, and eventually all humanity. This would develop a broader understanding and meaning of good citizenship. Political organizers, see Group 5. The Tibetan describes them as organizers, inferring that the workers in this group will facilitate right political and social order within civilization through the expression of the will, an aspect of Shambhala under the laws of service and group progress. Their objective is to bring about cohesive relationships between nations and for demonstrating how the divine will works out in consciousness. Political organizers strive to make mankind aware that it is collectively part of one humanity, irrespective of nation, race, color, stage of evolutionary path. Night workers do not take sides, but instead seek to work from the center to bring interested parties together and to be objective and to address the issues in a nonpartisan manner. That's might go with Stephen Dinan's concept of transpartisanship. Success with this group will also depend on the work of the educators. At much higher levels of consciousness, the hierarchical department of Manu oversees government and humanity, while the Mahakoan oversees civilization. Both of these entities provide a higher inspired pattern to the plan, or of the plan, to be imposed upon the lower 18 subplanes for bringing about change within civilization. If we look at the world today, considering the vacuum of leadership, I've included the role of the statesman as a person who has both vision and a capacity for rising above partisanship, for representing the higher ideal for the welfare of its citizens. This statesman holds the theme of unity and oneness as primary and disassociates himself from the narrow-mindedness of nationalism. In the last 75 years, we've seen such people as Nelson Mandela, Mikhail Gorbachev, Franklin Roosevelt, Churchill, to name a few, who have had a positive transformative influence on the international stage. And the quote we have here from Churchill talks about, particularly here in America, the difference between a politician and a statesman is that a politician thinks about the next election while the statesman thinks about the next generation. We observe that most governments have typically been set up with an individual at the top as a politician and caretaker who sets the tone and agenda for his or her nation, irrespective of the type of government. What makes a person a statesman? True statesmen would work with higher principles, ideals, and would be able to simultaneously have a vision of the plan, how their country fits, and has a will for enacting great change within society. On a national level, the statesman senses the soul of the nation and gives him the capacity for bringing the diverse forces of the seed groups of politics, finance, culture, education, science, and religion into a higher realization. Seed Group 6, Workers in the Field of Religion. In Problems of Humanity, Alice Bailey wrote, "Churchmen need to remember that the human spirit is greater than the churches and greater than their teaching." Centuries ago, the world's main religions were founded by great teachers such as the Christ and the Buddha, and thousands of other mystics and sages and initiates of all faiths. In retrospect, their teachings have inspired all that is great in the human spirit through literature, the arts, science, philosophy. On another note, due to arrogance, narrow-mindedness, selfishness, and mistruths, religions have caused great wars in community, infighting, and certainly represent division and separation. This is the opposite of what their originating founders had envisioned. The Spirit of God is both immanent, that is, present in our awareness, and transcendent, that is, individual is capable of connecting with the higher planes. Through this understanding, humanity as a whole will come to be seen as a complete expression of divinity. Religion in the New Age will revolve around man's desire to understand the divine life by subjectively approaching and seeking at one-ment with it. This will be enabled through a deeper connection with the soul. With the various religions, workers will choose to emphasize unity and fellowship of spirit by seeking common ground and establishing cohesion through universal values. This builds bridges and leads to service working out in their local communities and the world. Eventually, their work will provide a universal platform for the founding of the New World religion. Seed Group 7, Scientific Observers. Scientific observers apply a mental understanding of universal concepts and the laws of nature. Scientists will act as a communicator between the human spirit and the energies and forces which make up forms. When scientists are able to acknowledge the factual existence of the soul and the etheric body, they will be able to connect with the Buddhic and the intuitional plane. This will enable them to subjectively sense how the Deva kingdom makes up forms and how they build. With this discovery, the scientific observers will relate the subhuman kingdoms with the human kingdom through an understanding of how various forces and energies work together. They will also be studying reincarnation and the law of rebirth and how it relates to the transformation of forms. They will study the motivating energy that penetrates the outer form and the one who creates new forms as an expression of the inflowing spiritual life. See Group 8, the psychologists. Major task for the psychologists, the New Age will be concerned with the revelation of the soul, leading to the revelation of divinity in humanity. They will study the relationships between the three subhuman kingdoms, that is, the mineral, the plant, and the animal, in nature, and show how the human kingdom functions midway between them. Preparation for becoming the psychologist will emphasize developing a soul awareness and right reaction to energy in any form, whether between individuals, groups, or subhuman kingdoms. They will understand the qualities of energy and force, of ideals, and the flow of light, and that it is the soul and its interactions which characterizes the different groups. As healers of the individual psyche, the psychologist therapist will seek to help the patient overcome any psychological impediments that block soul integration or their capacity for service. This will lead to right character building. As a therapist, the psychologist will arrive at an understanding of how forces and thought forms affect the human mind and cause psychological imbalance, such as what we have now in the etheric and astral bodies. From a strictly healing consideration, the psychologist and magnetic healer could collaborate to recognize the healing energies from the soul via the plane of the intuition. Just as with the magnetic healers, the psychologist will facilitate healing of the personality and the psychic and the physical etheric form by working with the vital forces of the etheric body. See Group 9, the financiers or economists. We don't know exactly what currency will be in the New Age, but the financial service group, as the Tibetan also calls it, will work with the Aquarian principle of sharing. Principle of sharing revolves around the sharing of material wealth, money, and resources. They will see money as a valuable potential energy to be shared for the benefit of all humanity, and will directionalize money, resources, and commerce to create an economic system to facilitate equality and abundance. The issue is not just about the distribution of funds and resources, but to invest in and create more wealth or abundance in a responsible and non-reckless manner. In the New Age, all people will be recognized for their worth and for what they can contribute to society. Monies could be allocated for education and training to provide right intellectual development for each individual to participate in society. When the economy is organized based on sound spiritual basis, unemployment would end and all commerce and business transactions will be conducted with integrity, accountability, and transparency. On another note, the financial service group has the responsibility for holding the attitude of establishing peace and eliminating the causes of war. This can be done by directing monies away from the war-making industries toward more humanitarian pursuits, such as investment in education, eliminating poverty, and making healthcare and medicine available for all. In today's world, there's a possible seed for future in how wealth is used through the Responsible Health Project. It's made up of built by business leaders, investors, and inheritors who believe that the growing inequity or inequality in our societies around the world is not in their best interest, nor in the best interest of humanity as a whole. And then there's the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, which works to help all people lead healthy, productive lives. In developing countries, it focuses on improving people's health and giving them the chance to uplift themselves out of hunger and extreme poverty. The final group, Group 10, the creative workers, are known as the Great Synthesizer. They work by relating the other 9 seed groups into creative expression on the physical plane. In today's world, they are closely related to the 9th group, the financiers and the economists, who help with the materialization of things and allows the work of the hierarchy to be brought forth to humanity. In their process, the creative workers link and blend life and form creatively to create manifestations of beauty. Exoterically, they synthesize words, color, music, and sculpted forms to create literature, art, music, and designs across myriads of professions and seed groups. This poster was, it's from the New Group of World Servers poster. It's from the Institute of Planetary Synthesis in Geneva. And for those who know Rudolph and Alice in Geneva, they pass on their greetings, especially to Michael also. The poster shows cosmic love at the center, surrounded by the planetary hierarchy. The next outer circle shows the various seed groups and the United Nations agencies that are implementing change. We'll study this closer in the workshop this afternoon. In summing up, the takeaway I want to leave you with is that there is a thought form of showing divine purpose in all that we do. We, the light workers, must see, understand, and identify with the flows of energy and force in ourselves, our group, to initiate change. We must become the change we want to see happen in the world. We acknowledge there is a breakdown and shift happening in both the inner and the outer planes, and that we must be present and play our role. This is a call and appeal for us to act and to recognize our purpose and see it as clear as possible. We need to use our creative energies for creating the true and the beautiful, and to build right human relations in all our activities and relationships across all groups. I've examined some of the subjective influences from Shambhala, the hierarchy, the Christ, to the light workers in service work. We're currently in what's called the stage of the forerunner, which leads up to the conclave of 2025. With an awareness of the existence of the plan, this can provide purpose for guiding humanity as we transform ourselves to the coming new age. With my overview of the 10 seed groups, these descriptions are mostly what DK foresaw and what they are intended to become in the new age. From our perspective, they are ideals. Some already is visible in our world, and most of it is still quite far off. I realize that most of us cannot be concerned with directly implementing right human relations or even establishing the requirements for the new civilization. Our challenge is to be focused with our service group and the furthering of the ageless wisdom teachings, and at the same time be open to the impulses and impressions from the hierarchy. So how do we orient ourselves and take ourselves to the next level of systemic thinking? I suggest that this be done with spokespersons who can communicate the higher ideals and values without getting lost in partisan politics. Are we part of the warring ideologies, or can we become transpartisan, as Stephen Dining called it? When we practice division, we shut ourselves off from the second ray expression of soul love, which is about practicing harmlessness and right human relations. Can we become subtle and physical plane activists to engage life in all its challenges in an effort to influence the overt glamour and illusion toward change and bringing people and groups together? As light workers, our place in evolution is to shift what is happening in the collective by allowing for the creative intelligence to flow through us in powerful ways. This can be our contribution. Always keep in mind that we as spokespersons representing the teachings in whatever we do and with anybody we meet and interact with, how much are we holding the love and the light of our soul? So what's next? Group healing or continued separatism? This mindset applies to all the seed groups, regardless of culture. We are awakening to a coherent group field and are motivated by higher purpose. We are planetary co-creators, living in a quantum potential. We are living on an evolutionary edge, with a planetary culture of wisdom and peace as our potential. Together as a group in touch of at least a sense of the plan, we can dispel disharmony wherever it is and replace it by bring forth light and love. This gives light to the dawning of a new day. Since we have 6 minutes left, maybe we can field a couple of questions.
I saw your chart there. It's fabulous, that chart. Just wondered, some of the connections are obvious with the ashrams, but can you connect them, each of the seed groups, with the rays in the ashrams?
I don't know exactly what ashram comes from the intuitional plane, but the ashrams are seeding that. Yeah. Other questions?
Thank you, David. The 10 seed groups are quite inspiring. And I'm wondering, can you say any more about who is actually in these seed groups? And for those of us that are inspired, is there like a place I can sign up to be in one or more seed groups?
Well, the seed groups are already existing on the physical plane. That's a reality. It's just simply whether they're implementing the highest aspect of what the ashram is intending. That's the question. So I would say connect with the leaders of those groups. If you're politically motivated like I am, connect with, become an activist, the grassroots level, whatever, and then make that happen. If you connect with scientists, you connect with educators, connect with them and inspire the higher ideals, but always hold that higher soul vision for bringing forth the teaching.
I think you may have just answered my question. I was wondering which seed group you in particular have an affinity towards. It's the politics?
Yeah, mine's the political observers. Yes, that's mine. Yeah.
May I recommend FCNL, Friends Committee on National Legislation. They seek peace and justice, and they do it transpartisan. And Stephen Dinan's part of it. Who else here? There's a bunch of you. Okay? People know about it. FCNL.
Another emphasis that I put on there is the concept of the spokespersons, which I talk about. And, we talk about our teachings, we talk about being astrologers, we talk about being healers, therapists, whatever. But it's like, as much as we hold this energy here and we strengthen our own wills and our own hearts and desire, and we're actually recharged by having these conferences every year, we go back into our individual lives. And how much do we remember this information? And how much do we anchor this in ourselves when we're talking to just average people out there? So it is that this is part of the energy about what the seed groups are about, is to strengthen. Because literally the seed groups are the foundation or the backbone of humanity right at the moment. And it's like they are the way that we can restructure humanity. Any other questions? Oh, another question.
In Arizona, right now, the teachers here have gone back to work. I don't know if you've been aware of it, but the teachers in this state started a grassroots movement called Red for Ed. It was nonpartisan. And being a teacher myself and having friends that were part of that movement, I can tell you that that's one of the ways that the educators in the New Age are using that seed group right now. And because of what they did for being out for 6 days, education has gotten more funding. It's still not enough, but it's not just about helping the teachers. It's basically about helping the students and having the students the center of what they were doing. So this is one way that this is working out in the world right now.
And in light of the concept of the educators, just as an example, they are responding to influence in the world. They are responding to influence in the inner planes, in the influence of how education is an important aspect of humanity, just as the children of gun violence are standing up and representing those as movements too, or the Me Too movement too, the women being abused, and it's bringing forth the balance between the male and the female energies.
David, you mentioned your interest in the political work and your workshop today, and Rudolph and Alice in Geneva. Do you have insights on building a stronger sense of citizenship in the world and creating that global civic culture? Are you going to talk about some of that in your workshop today? civic participation?
I certainly can address that. That's civic participation, of course, responds to the political organizers group, which I'm interested in, but there's other ways of doing that too, and it's largely through education, and it's becoming aware of different ways of teaching people and inspiring them to be real human beings, to get past their sense of anger and their frustrations and their fear and learn how to work with those energies.
Okay, if that's it, then thank you very
thank you.
much, David.
Thank you.
Give him a hand. All right, so once again, what is the name of, the title of your new book?
Oh, yeah. The title of my new book is Subjective Influences Through the 10 Seed Groups, and available in the bookstore, of course.
Okay, good. So how about if we have a book signing for you during intermission?
Certainly.